All right, so welcome to the Eric Tries Too Hard podcast network presenting the, as of now, this recording, untitled show on The Wire. Concept is, my name is Eric. I am a huge Wire fan. I am also from Baltimore. I am here with my co-host Mike.
Yo.
And Mike is watching The Wire for the first time ever.
Yes.
Mike is he's a comedian from Baltimore as well. And we're going to do a couple of these episodes, the two of us going through episode by episode and talking about the show, Baltimore history in regards to the show, real life versus what was fictionalized, along with just, talking about the show. As we go on in this first season of The Wire and the first season of our Wire podcast, we will we'll invite some other Baltimore comics on to help us discuss various episodes. So just to jump off, I wanted to point out how, and this is kind of what made me want to do a podcast on The Wire. I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially on pop culture and entertainment. And one podcast I was listening to recently was on the show Game of Thrones. Now, I always hear a lot of people, yes, Mike, now I'm talking to you. The audience can go fuck themselves. This is just you and me talking, really. So I was listening to the podcast, and I noticed how a lot of people compare The Wire to shows like Breaking Bad from the drug relation, also from the critically acclaimed relation. Same with the show Oz from kind of the criminal and justice system element. But the more I was listening to this Game of Thrones podcast, I realized The Wire is Game of Thrones. The Wire is not Breaking Bad. Yeah, Breaking Bad is more character-driven storylines, whereas The Wire is, and it's as David Simon, the creator, had said, this is a show about The Wire. It's a show about how institutions impact the lives of individuals. That's the quote. So it's like, so it really is about how the entire world functions. And Mike, as you continue watching these seasons, it can go right now. You're just on kind of the police, the drug game. It branches off deeper into politics, into the media, into the school systems, into the blue-collar areas. It really shows how a city works and how the institutions in a city work. Right. And so that's kind of how Game of Thrones is, both in this is a world we've created, and you're going to see all the different layers of that world, but also because they throw 800 fucking characters at you immediately, and it's the most confusing goddamn thing in the world. So I wanted to know, just before we go into the episode specifically, were you able to keep track of all these characters?
For the most part, I couldn't really remember their names other than McNulty. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't know their names, but I could recognize the faces and keep track that way.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. This is my probably right now. I'm watching it for the season for the third time through. Sorry, the series for the third time through. But I should clarify. I've seen seasons 1 and 3 and 4 maybe 10 times each.
Really?
I still had. Oh yeah, those 3 you'll find. Those are usually the fan favorite seasons. Those seasons are whatever. Even watching these episodes, especially the pilot, I found myself prepping for the episode and going, what was that guy's name? Who the...
Really?
Yeah, I even have... There's one person I even...
You there?
I think I just called him... I think I just called the guy Very Large Sergeant. I think was the only name I could come up for him. Nice. But I'm sure he has a real name. But yeah, I did my best to get the name straight. So you're definitely not alone.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up before we jump into the episode was how so the episodes take place. They were shot from the seasons, 5 seasons, shot from 2002, or not, aired from 2002 to 2007. The first season makes direct reference to September 11th and the institutional changes after September 11th in a city like Baltimore. But the creator of the show I guess creator and the co-execs, one of them was a reporter for the Baltimore Sun, and the other worked for Baltimore police, and he also worked in the school system. So they know these things inside and out, but their experience, because they've been writers for a while before doing The Wire, and they did and so a lot of the stories and the real people they based a lot of these characters on, this all took place in the late 80s, early 90s. So it was like the height of crack cocaine in like every major city. And so what we're kind of seeing is a much worse Baltimore than even the Baltimore that existed when the show was being shot.
Really?
Yeah. And I know that now Baltimore is even more cleaned up than at that time. Are you watching just the few episodes that you've seen so far? Have you noticed any stark difference? I know maybe you're not from those neighborhoods, but any stark difference between
Maybe I'm not.
the things you saw in the show and what your real life Baltimore experience was?
It's hard to say for sure because obviously a show's going to focus on certain aspects. It's not gonna show all the peaceful, happy things happening in Baltimore too. I'd say my biggest experience into delving into those neighborhoods kind of has been attending an inner city community college and just kind of getting to know that community and kind of being around there and going to and from and my impression was always like it's not really that bad, like it's way worse than people think. But that's also a community college community.
Yeah.
So.
You also in the show itself, they make countless references to like not messing with people outside of the drug game.
Right,
like,
right.
Yeah. Civilians, as they call us.
Yeah, it seems like that was kind of as the drug thing became huge in the '80s, like there kind of started to become these unwritten rules and maybe even written rules of like trying to keep things as peaceful as possible and trying to not have civilians involved. I know that a lot of gangs made an alliance to not do drive-bys anymore because they didn't want to harm innocent children. And also there's like a Bloods and a Crips kind of alliance in the early 90s that I think is kind of stuck to some degree. And like I think a lot of them have realized, they kind of touched on that in jumping ahead to a couple episodes up. They kind of touched on like, why are we drawing police here by being violent when we can just make money?
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of the drug dealers kind of realized that at some point and kind of tried to keep it more contained.
By the way, you had mentioned how obviously it's a show for entertainment, so they're not going to jump back to like happy areas. How jarring?
Well, yeah, I mean, any like product, any production is going to highlight the whatever like leads to the point of it, like.
How jarring would it be if they just quick shot over to Canton and a bunch of like drunk college kids partying? And then it's just like, why'd they show us that? That's kind of mean.
That would be. I almost think maybe they could use a little bit of that to like show the contrasting sides of the city, like the wealthier areas.
Yeah, that is interesting. I know they do make casual references to the county.
Yeah.
Which is
they
like
call it the country.
Yeah, that made me laugh. Well, like the funny thing, like my personal experience with West Baltimore in that time period, I was going to punk shows in West Baltimore a lot from 2002 to 5 or 6. And so in that time span, the way we'd get to West Baltimore for these venues, like Charm City Art Space, the Auto Bar, which, by the way, today are much safer areas than when I was going in there before. The joke I always make about it is we used to get like threatened by like thugs on the corner, for like made fun of us for our pants being too tight. And now when we walk down the streets, the hipsters are making fun of us for our pants being too loose. Like they're not cleaning up. Yeah, that's kind of how it's definitely changed in those areas. But the way we would get from my nice snug little suburb in Ellicott City, which is one of the richest cities like in the country.
Really?
Oh yeah. Well, that statistic, or maybe I'm blending it with maybe just Howard County.
Ellicott City is one of the richest cities in the country.
I'd have to look it up, but I recall seeing that. I recall getting like made fun of that actually. Everybody from a suburb wanted to be more urban, and so they just be like, well, "You're from Richtown."
Right.
Well, so like, but so to get to West Baltimore, we would take Route 40 down through Ellicott City, which is like this really nice suburb, then through Catonsville, which is kind of this like white trash suburb, and then you go right into this now entering Baltimore sign, and you are in the fucking thick of it. Like you were in dead center. Like we called it the Wire Country. Like that's what, because that's when we wanted people to know the area we were
you
talking
probably drove
about.
by my school, actually.
Oh, gee, yeah. All right, so anyway, so that's kind of how I wanted to open it, just to kind of give an idea of the attitudes going into making the show. So let's start off with this first pilot, the target.
Sure.
The Snot-Boogie opening. So just a quick recap of the scene. Officer McNulty is talking to a potential witness who he's trying to get to flip to testify in court about this murder of a guy named Snot-Boogie. And the dude tells him, oh, well, yeah, we were playing a dice game. Every week, Snot-Boogie waits till the pot gets really high, snatches the money and runs. Every week, we catch him, we beat him down, and take the money back. But that's it. But this time, somebody went and killed Snot-Boogie. Yeah. And he's saying, and then so McNulty asked the really famous line from the whole show, in fact, was just, so why do you let him play? And he goes, well, this is America.
Right.
So what did you think of that opening scene?
Okay, well, I have two questions about that scene. Number one, D'Angelo is the character later, right? The drug dealer.
D'Angelo is he's the drug dealer.
But he's not in court for killing Snot-Boogie.
It's not. No, this is a very common confusion. Yeah, that was completely unrelated to anything else in the episode.
Does the Snot-Boogie murder come back at any time?
I haven't seen season 5 in a while, but I doubt it. I think Snot-Boogie was just there to set the
Why didn't
scene.
they just open with the killing that he did?
You know what? Because I have no idea. That is a very fair point. Okay, that's actually, I was going to wait till the end of this, but much like season 1 of Game of Thrones, a big criticism of The Wire from me, I don't know who else feels this way, maybe my it's just really bad, but is that this first episode does not do a great job at differentiating between characters, roles, and I think it's a good sign of the storytelling, in that they don't have like a Luke Skywalker character who's like, I'm a farm boy, I don't know what's going on, please tell me in plain English as if I'm the viewer.
Yeah, you always have to have that information dump scene where it's like, listen, you're a farm boy, but maybe there's something very special about you.
And
what do you mean?
So that's way to make Obi-Wan seem even creepier than he possibly.
Well, that's okay. Here's another brief interjection. It seems like this show is very much about realism and, not following the standard story archetype, and almost like a documentary, but with like actors.
Almost like Game of Thrones.
I've never seen Game of Thrones, but.
This is great. That's the next one we'll do.
But it seemed like there was a big wave of that in like the mid to late 2000s with television shows and also with movies, like No Country for Old Men and I don't know, some other crap, right?
Yeah, some other crap. I love that movie. A classic tale.
Like Capote and I feel like there's some other ones.
Yeah.
But was that? Do you think that kind of kicked off this whole realism trend of like the late 2000s?
I think definitely. I'd like to think. The Wire is such a great show that I love. I'd like to think that it's inspired all these other shows. I think the Wire, much like The Sopranos, when they came out, were very ahead of their time, and I think they definitely. But the truth is that the show that maybe not for realism purposes, but for the level of depth in a show, as far as what a network, even as big as HBO, thinks that the audience is capable of receiving, would be Lost, because that's the first major consumer network hit that was like, oh, we can throw all this shit at people.
And it seemed like it kind of started a trend of like intelligent TV shows that aren't the exact same thing over and over that we've been seeing for 100 years.
Yeah.
And like I definitely appreciated how it just kind of like threw us into it and just just introduced us into characters' lives like in the middle of scenes, and didn't, like you said, it didn't start with a big information dump. Yeah. It just assumes we'll be able to catch on.
And that's why I really like, and I'm going to go into this at the end of the recap, is that I think they do a really good job of letting the dominoes fall of, like you said, we just get thrown into their world. But I'm very interested, whenever I watch a pilot, I want to know why we're being dropped in at this particular time. And obviously the D'Angelo case is like the thing that kicks it off. However, there is a set of dominoes that fall where like all these specific events have to happen, which is why we get so many different scenes of characters. All these different institutions have to have a certain thing happen for this story to go into full gear. And I think the pilot, when you break it down after analyzing it for a while, it's very clear and makes a lot of sense. And I'll get to that towards the end. So let's jump right into the trial of D'Angelo.
Well, I had one other question about the opening. The famous line, and I'm probably going to sound like a total idiot. I don't get it. Like, what does that mean? Like, this is America. I don't understand what that whole interaction means.
The overall, like, in my interpretation, I've done some readings on like what other people think. The culmination of that for me is like overall, it's just things are the way they are. Is kind of how it is. It's like logic in the drug game or in the street game. It's thrown aside. These are the rules, and this is it's.
Is it kind of really, like a statement on traditionalism or conservatism?
I would.
Kind
that's
of like
well, you phrase it better than me. Yeah, it's as Montel Jordan said. This is how we do it.
That flashed through my mind right as I said that, and I was like, all right, I really shouldn't start singing that song right now, even though
the great prophet Montel, spoke the words that echoed down through generations. Well, I now know you don't watch Game of Thrones, but for any listeners who do, it is known Khaleesi, or it is known. Like there are entire like cultures in Game of Thrones where they're like, no, it's just known. This is the way it is, and it just is. And so it's like, well, it's America, so we have this freedom. And I think it's also a commentary, that specific line on, we have freedom. We make choices. And it's kind of like how in another like a different socioeconomic area, or even maybe it's just the drug game. Maybe it's even in the inner city, but outside of like the drug and gang game, is that like the way people look at it would be, the way it is we go to work and we don't like hurt each other, and that's about it. And you're generally I don't know, whatever. But in this, it's these are just the way things are. It's America, so everyone's free. This is our responsibility. It's our responsibility only to beat his ass. It's our responsibility to let him play. It's our responsibility to beat his ass. But
so it's kind of just saying. It's kind of just saying these are. It's kind of just introducing us to one of the rules of the street.
Yeah. It's also I think to put us in. We should be like McNulty in culture shock. We're not where like us as the viewer are not at a place where we are where our culture is accepted. We need to adapt to their customs. Is the point.
Right.
So jumping into the trial of D'Angelo Barksdale, we meet a shit ton of characters who will all come back in spades. So I'm not going to list some of the ones who are just kind of sitting in the courtroom. We'll get into them later. But from the side of the law, we meet Bunk, which is McNulty's partner. And because they get broken up in this pilot episode, I think it's very important to remember that they are partners. Because if you kind of miss that small detail that they mentioned maybe twice throughout this extremely dense episode.
I don't think I noticed it.
Nobody does. That's why this opening episode for us is going to be way more informational than all the rest of the episodes. Because this is, all the rest will just be like talking about it. But this is just, there's probably more confusion in this than there is in anything else. But so they're partners. So as you see them throughout the series interacting, you have to remember, they're not just two random guys like who work for the police. They were partners for years. So then you meet him. You also meet, there's another, the detective who's in charge. By the way, I'm going to get all the ranks wrong for minor characters. So I'm assuming he's a detective. The police officer who was the one who was in charge of charging or pressing whatever, like D'Angelo Barksdale. It was his case. It's not McNulty's case. It's this other guy's who should be in the courtroom seeing how it played out. But it's McNulty there who's showing the interest. It's not the cop who actually did it, which is, our first inkling into maybe the police department isn't as great as people assume police departments are, and McNulty's kind of a special case, which is why we're following him as opposed to one of these other assholes who doesn't care. Now, on the stand, we see Gant. He is a witness who fingers D'Angelo Barksdale as the murderer. Now, here's another thing that I didn't notice my first time through. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. That D'Angelo has been in jail for quite some time. He's been in jail from what I think it was like 8 months, something like the better part of a year, basically. So he's been in jail awaiting this trial for quite some time. Yeah. It's not like my first viewing. It seemed like that happened like last week. And then he's on trial and he's getting out and he's back home and that was whatever. But Gant so D'Angelo apparently killed this guy in front of a shit ton of people in pretty much broad daylight. And Gant is one of many people who saw it happen. And he points him out. And then of course the security guard who gets on the stand, who had agreed to point him out, she says, no, that wasn't him. I didn't see him. I have no idea who. It was a different person. So she chickens out. But Gant is the only one who pointed him out. Now, on the street side, we meet Stringer Bell, a favorite amongst Wire fans. And that's another thing I want to know from you. As you're getting introduced to these characters, if somebody strikes you as like someone you really hate or someone you really, really like, feel free to point that out. Okay. But Stringer Bell, as McNulty says, the guy in the glasses and suit sitting there scaring the living shit out of every witness. He's Avon Barksdale, the mysterious Avon Barksdale, the drug kingpin. He's his number two, basically his guy who's allowed to be in plain view. Avon always hides from plain view, and Stringer is the guy who's the face of the organization, essentially. Yeah. And as D'Angelo Barksdale gets off, he is not convicted. McNulty walks by Stringer Bell and says, "Nicely done." Did you have any questions or thoughts on that scene? Don't feel like you have to have them on everything because there's going to be plenty more. I just want to give you an opportunity.
No, that seems pretty accurate.
Yeah.
That one was pretty cut and dry. Now that you say it, it makes sense that he would have been in jail that long, because that's generally what happens.
Exactly. But I think because of the Snot-Boogie thing, it felt like it was very quick.
Yeah, and also I think that's almost like a tactic. I don't know if other cities do that, but it's almost like so many murderers get off because it's just so easy to manipulate jury trials.
Yeah.
And people just don't trust the police. That
maybe why the cop who put him in there didn't give a shit in the first place.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah, and a lot of that. So I think it's like they just, they try to keep you in jail as long as possible, even if you're eventually proven innocent.
Yeah. So immediately after that, so I'm going out of order with some of these scenes because I'm kind of like, they jump back and forth between storylines. So I'm just trying to follow the storyline until it ends and then jump to another storyline. So next up in that sequence, McNulty and the judge from the case, the judge who's clearly not happy about this outcome, they meet in the judge's quarters and talk about this mysterious drug dealer, Avon Barksdale. And McNulty basically breaks it down like, okay, so there's this guy who's this drug kingpin. Nobody knows anything about him. He's like, but I got burned for a murder from these same guys, the Stringer Bell and these other guys who I keep seeing. This other cop just, in this case right here, got burned on a murder. Guy got off scot-free. And he says, that, according to him, there's at least 8 other murders where they got off because of this drug network. Like these 10 seemingly independent, or at least 10 seemingly independent murders all got off scot-free because of this drug cart or whatever network. And so they kind of talk. And so the underlying, or so what did you think McNulty was trying to do in that scene? I want to get your opinion on that before I just tell you.
I don't know. I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
Oh, sorry. Let me ask you a better question. Would you say it's because, well, so what he's doing is he's trying to do the whole, I'm not telling you this it's like, I'm just going to say this out loud because I'm feeling passionate about it. I don't know for a fact that you're going to go and set a chain of events into motion because you now have this information. But he secretly like hopes that he will. So he knows you're a judge. I know what's going to happen when I tell you this. I know you're going to go to my superiors and make them change shit up. However, or do you think that McNulty is really passionate about the case at this point, or do you think he's just trying to fuck over his superiors?
The indications so far would be that he's a cop who wants to make a difference among a sea of people who don't care. But it's very early on in the series, so I would think that he cares somewhat. But you can't really tell for sure what his motivations are yet, or at least I can't.
I realized as I was saying that, I was like, that's kind of a shitty question. Why would he know that? So like, okay, so yeah, no, so exactly. So sorry. One other thing that I wanted to point out that a lot of people tend to miss is that this judge, he makes mention, now I'm a judge, I can say whatever I damn well please. He is literally like a brand new judge. And apparently him and McNulty go way back. Like, they've known each other for a long time. This is just the first time where McNulty's buddy is now a judge and has the power to do a few things. So McNulty, yeah, he's definitely a passionate guy, but he's also like, he's not above. It's not like he came to him and said, hey, listen, I need to get on this guy. I want to set up a case against this guy, but I can't do it unless you help me. He doesn't come to him like that. He comes to him like, it's this thing, I just don't know what to do about it. I have no idea. Maybe, I don't know, maybe someone out there could help me out. That'd be great. But
yeah, I definitely get the sense so far that this is going to be a complex show with complex characters, which of course lends to realism because people in real life aren't good guys or bad guys. They're kind of both, and they have different motivations, and sometimes they're not even sure what their motivations are or why. So there'll probably be like a lot of little things, like little character moments like that you might have to help me out with because it's hard for me to pay attention. Like I like the show so far, but I'm just like so ADD that it's like a little bit hard for me to pick up things like that.
Oh no, it is. I feel like also after doing this podcast episode, it's going to feel a lot more comfortable when things are broken down in manageable pieces.
Right.
Okay, so now there are two storylines that I kind of want to talk about where we start establishing a couple of things. One, we establish the current nature of the war on drugs, which as a character we'll get to know very well. I believe it was Lieutenant Daniel says he can't call. No, wait. Who cares? Doesn't matter who it was. My bad. I'm sure somebody when I post this will give me shit about not knowing. But the quote is, "You can't call this shit a war. Wars end." So
yeah, that was a really powerful line.
So you're going to learn about the current way the Baltimore PD handles the war on drugs.
Yeah, it is weird how it's just like a never-ending thing that, like, does it ever really change anything, Like, does anything ever change?
Yeah, and exactly. And in the face of a post-9/11 world, because before then, it really was like, and remember, we're talking, these are based on events from the late 80s, early 90s, when Nancy Reagan was very much...
Right.
War on drugs.
Putting tanks through people's houses and stuff.
Oh my god! Oh, that would have made a great scene.
No, that really happened.
Oh no, I know, but I meant like in the show. If they had just like alluded to that, and had
with her like literally in the tank too.
Wait, really?
Yeah, she did like a press shoot with her in the tank, like busting into somebody's house.
Great. It's like a couple of dime bags of weed.
Yeah.
Well, so starting off that, and we also learn about the Baltimore PD chain of command. So, so in that we have a huge story with Lieutenant Daniels, and we have a couple of cops that we follow along with some McNulty stuff getting tied in. And I think that's where the meat of this episode, at least from law enforcement, is. So I'm going to jump through a couple of scenes real quick. First, we see a couple of cops doing what they're calling a rip and run. They run in, they arrest a couple of drug dealers, they grab whatever like dope and cash they have on them, and that's the dope on the table that they can brag about, and they come home and say, look at all these drugs we got off the streets.
Right.
But anybody in the media eats that up, but anybody in the police department knows this isn't actually going to stop anything. This isn't where we're not hitting them where it hurts. It doesn't hurt them arresting low-level guys and stealing a little bit of, or stealing, depends on who you are. Taking drugs and money is really not hurting them. So there are a couple of scenes where they're discussing these things, both chain of command and the rip and runs, and the cops are so happy about. They seem very excited about dope on the table, amount of cash they've seized, a lot of stats. Like when you have the murder police, they're all about their stats. whose turn is it to take the stat of there's an unsolved murder that is under your name, under your department, or under your supervisee. And it's really all about clearing names, as they put it. It's just getting names off the red list, the unsolved list, onto the black list, where you look like your department solved this many murders, your department has this many murders left over. And it's really just a game of, it's not a game of we need to solve these murders because it's for the betterment of our city and it's the right thing to do. It's a game. We need to do it so we look good, so our superiors look good, and so we have, at lower levels, bragging rights amongst other cops. And we continue seeing that with the cops that we'll meet, like Greg's and Herc, and so on. But the names won't matter as much until we really get into stories with those characters. So then let's see. So then we have Lieutenant Daniel. So Officer Greg, she's the woman. The female cop of the three that we really follow. There's the two dudes, Herc and I have his name written down here somewhere. I'm just blanking on it right now. Basically, the white dude and the black dude who are partners. And then there's the woman who we see working with them a little bit. She works directly for Lieutenant Daniels. Like she's his cop. Like that's kind of like they have that bond. Just so that's important to notice. So let's see. So yeah, he's talking with those cops, and they discuss chain of command. And there's a lot of talks about McNulty going over, as the episode goes on. A lot of talks about McNulty going over everybody's head to talk to this judge, to have the judge tell McNulty's superiors and Daniel's superiors and all the superiors, the majors and just the higher ups, that they need to be handling this Avon Barksdale case. And all of these, and we find out in that scene. They don't even really have a date of birth for Avon Barksdale. Like, it's just embarrassing. None of these higher-ups have any idea who this drug kingpin is, but it seems like everybody on the street and a lot of low-level officers know exactly who he is. And so it makes those higher-ups look bad, which we'll get into in just a second. But the kind of murmurings about McNulty is McNulty just fucked his career up. And what's crazy about that is it really goes to show how everyone else is just on track for the next promotion. How do you get the next promotion? By not pissing off your higher-ups, by making everyone else look good, by keeping your stat line clear. And as McNulty says time and time again, that doesn't represent good police work. It doesn't actually make the city any better, and it's why Baltimore is such a shithole. Both Bunk and McNulty tell each other, what's the line? That'll teach you not to give a fuck when it's not your turn to give a fuck. It's like McNulty cared and got caught messing up his career. Bunk cared, got caught catching a murder, and now he's got to clear that stat.
You said later on in the series we get into the role the media plays in all of this?
Not for a while, but yeah.
Yeah, it is weird that, like, you know, why doesn't media report? Like, shouldn't it be the media's job to kind of let people know that that's how the police operate? You know, that they don't have the city's best interest in mind.
Oh, absolutely. But as you'll see as the show goes on, these are all institutions that are tied so tightly together that in order to get information, the media needs to have ins with X, Y, and Z. In order to get up ahead in the world, every one of these institutions everyone has hands in everyone else's pockets. And so, and there's a great, for anyone listening to this who's seen the first full season, they'll know what I mean by this. There's a great concept of chasing the money as opposed to chasing the drugs. That when you chase the drugs, you find the drug dealer. When you chase the money, you don't know what you're going to find. And so it's a very, it like foreshadows the idea of, all these institutions on both sides of the law are a lot more intertwined than people think, things aren't an accident. When bureaucracy gets terrible and doesn't have the people's best interest in mind, it has somebody's best interest in mind.
Do they imply that even journalists could be in the pocket of drug dealers in some way?
Now that I don't know. I'm not going to lie. Season 5 is one I've only seen once, and it is universally the least favorite season. But here's the thing with season 5, though. It wraps up really nicely. The show ends great. It's like it's a bad season of a great show. It's like there are plenty of great shows whose best seasons aren't as good as season 5 of The Wire.
Yeah.
So it's So, but it's just one of those where it's like if I'm gonna go rewatch a season, there are 4 other ones that I would jump to. Okay, so
one time when I was like kind of a journalist to some degree, I got accused of receiving free food from a restaurant that I was endorsing. Yeah.
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 How was the food?
It was good. I mean, I was more endorsing it as a symbol of kind of what's wrong with the neighborhood of Remington as far as like one tiny little neighborhood association ruining like businesses that try to come in there.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's another.
No, that's interesting. No, I think that's really interesting. And yeah, please, anytime you have Baltimore tidbits like that, where you really like, that's awesome. Okay, so then next, if this episode wasn't so dense, you should see my notes on it. I've got notes for the first 3 episodes, and the first episode is 3 times longer than the others.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So then, as my notes say, McNulty and in parentheses Sergeant Fat Cop. I need to look up his name. He's always eating. That the Major wants to talk to McNulty. Now the Major, Major Rawls, he is Daniel's boss. Lieutenant Daniel's boss. Did you watch? Oh, sorry, never mind. So yeah, he's Daniel's boss. He's also McNulty's like boss's boss. He's a major. And as we learn kind of offhand, Lieutenant Daniels is on quote the fast track to being a major. Like so, if Daniels, who we see signs that he may or may not have a good heart in it, he may be. It's hard to tell if he's more a McNulty or he's more one of these other cops. But like, if he just shuts his mouth and makes everybody look good around him, he will be he will end up as a major.
Which one is he? The bald black guy?
Yeah. The tall one.
Okay.
Or skinny tall guy. Yeah. I was trying to think of other things he'd been in because if I'm bad at character names, I'm terrible at actor names. So Major Rawls is very pissed at McNulty for telling the judge about Avon Barksdale, and is basically like, I'm done with you. And he'll say that to other characters later on in the show. He's just like, I'm done with you. Let me. Oh, sorry. I should clarify. Major Rawls is So Major Rawls is like everybody's. He's a major. He's very, very high up. He's above all these other people. So he's not He's not Daniel's direct supervisor. That's my mistake. But he is, up higher up on that chain of command. And they keep saying. So when they say chain of command, what are you interpreting when they say McNulty chain of command? You have to respect the chain of command.
Packing order. Packing order, I guess, kind of tradition.
Yeah, typically. So if you have an issue, you go to your direct supervisor. No matter if you're the lowest on the totem pole, you don't go any higher than one rung above you. If your supervisor tells you to ignore it and just go fuck yourself, you have to do that. Like, it's not then you go to their supervisor. It's you can only talk to this person when you're this rank. And McNulty jumped a million steps or rungs on that ladder when telling the judge about that. And so it was it's like unheard of, unfathomable, career ending. Like, I didn't interpret it as that bad at first. I just figured they were pissed at him because everybody talks to everybody else like assholes in the show.
That's one thing I wanted to comment on was that was the only thing in it that really kind of turned me off was that it just seemed like a 80s cop movie where everybody's like, just the
you're goddamn out of control.
Get into my office, goddamn it. I've got the DEA breathing down my neck and you pull this crap, McNulty. Like it kind of feels like a Die Hard movie or something.
Yeah.
But and I don't really think they act like that in their office. I mean, it's probably pretty rough, but I don't think it's like that. Like, I had a girlfriend who was like a public defender, like in the jail. Like,
was she a redhead?
No.
Okay.
Why?
Oh, because the character who's she's not public defender, but our redhead lawyer who represents basically the law for 3 straight seasons. Yeah.
And I think not that I knew for sure, but it never sounded like that's how people talked in those offices. But,
I think that's
it just seemed like a cop cliche from the 70s or something.
And so for the most part that's true. Two parts on that. One, I think TV in general, like I've never been in a work environment where anybody talks to each other the way they talk to each other on TV work environments. And I think
restaurants, fine dining restaurants, I would say are the closest thing.
Really?
But outside of that, yeah.
Well, because it's like, to me, I think it's for two reasons. One, it's entertainment, so people will be more blunt with each other as opposed to like the actual like politeness. It's not particularly entertaining. But two, I think these writers have been so far removed from an actual workplace that like they don't like. It's almost like they're just like it's art imitating whatever, life imitating art, imitating life. I don't know.
Sure.
Who knows? That was actually the wrong expression that I used, but moving on anyway. So Major Rawls is pissed at McNulty, but it's just as far as the way that everyone's talking to and about McNulty, that's for real. He broke all the cardinal sin, or the cardinal sin, whatever, just like in one fell swoop. Like you really cannot do that. And there is not a precedent for that. That's just like, he really is a loose cannon, even in this world. So let's see. So I got a bunch of stuff from the streets here, but I want to wrap up this cop stuff before I jump back into the streets. So there's a lot of. I just want to mention this because it comes back later, but like there's there's the scene in the office where McNulty is asked, "Where don't you want to go?" And they kind of mention, well, you don't tell someone where you don't want to go because that's where they're gonna put you. You think that they're gonna be good to you. But anytime someone's like being nice to you, it means they're trying to get dirt on you. But also, there's continual scenes. This is the only amount of quote unquote fluff I'd see in the episode, which is really they're hammering home. Stats are what matters. What McNulty did is unfounded and just not okay. And that chain of command and moving up in the ladder is what everyone almost across the board is focused on. And a lot of them, especially the low-level cops, they don't even think about it the way the higher-ups would, where it's just like, oh, no, I'm doing this for my personal benefit. The low-level cops are just like, no, this is just the way it is, which you will very soon see paralleled to how the low-level drug dealers and the higher-up drug dealers see it as well.
Interesting.
There are so many parallels that they don't directly draw, but exist between the streets and law enforcement. And it's unbelievable. This show's so fucking good. All right. So let's see. So I guess what I'll do now, we're at a good breaking point from the law. So let's go to the streets. So we got D'Angelo heading over to Orlando's Gentlemen's Club. And in the middle of D'Angelo just talking about like, man, you should have seen that lady's face when Stringer came in. She totally flipped it. She wasn't going to rat me out. Like, I got off scot-free. That was so awesome. Just, like, giddy with it. And he kind of gets schooled. You don't talk in the car. I don't care. You don't talk. And which is cool because it comes right after a scene where two of the higher-ups in law enforcement, they get into an elevator where there's a camera and they stop talking. And then they wait until they're off camera. Yeah. But with the drug dealers, they don't know where the cameras are, so they gotta always be on their toes. So then we get in to Orlando's Gentlemen's Club, which I don't know why, but it's like my favorite name of anything at all. Like Orlando's Gentlemen's Club. The guy who runs it, the guy with the longer hair, like frizzy longer hair, he even looks like an Orlando. Like I don't know. So Orlando kind of walks away, and you finally see Avon Barksdale for the first time, and Stringer, and they're talking a little shop. Stringer mentions McNulty is like that cop who he keeps showing up at these cases, so we know that they know who he is, and then we come to find that D'Angelo Barksdale is Avon's nephew, which is why it seems that he's been getting a little special treatment. Because we hear we hear Avon like, you gotta think, and then D'Angelo's like, you always tell me this. I know, I gotta make it better. I gotta do this. And he's like, but then he jumps back into, but did you see that lady's face when we made her flip? Like, so what are your thoughts on D'Angelo at this point? Like, what kind of person do you see him as? Just from the limited interaction that you've seen him have.
I don't know. He doesn't.
let me clarify.
We haven't really seen him be violent or jump off the fly off the cuff or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like he seems relatively peaceful, just a young drug dealer who wants to make it in the game. I don't know. I feel like there wasn't a whole lot of development in the first episode.
No, that makes perfect sense. I was seeing if you'd come up with the word that I did, but this is from the 10th watch. But entitled, he is very entitled.
Yeah, I can see a little bit of that.
In that his uncle is the dude, like his uncle is the guy. And I guess this also may not have been as clear in that scene, but like D'Angelo has an incredibly high up position. He's got prime real estate in one of the best drug areas. He is, but then when you hear him talk about how he's like a giddy little kid about like how the lady flipped or how he got off for murder, and then they really like then Avon breaks down what happened in the murder with the guy that D'Angelo killed, and he's like, you couldn't play him out into the lobby where your people were, so like you couldn't trick him to get him to follow you out to the lobby because some guy was coming at him. He's like, you couldn't have just taken a beating. You couldn't have let the guy beat the shit out of you instead of like, because you knew that the alternative was killing him. Like you couldn't do any of those things. Like you had to. And so the point was, in my opinion at least, it's not spelled out, but is that D'Angelo panicked because he isn't like, unlike the other people who risen in the ranks of this drug organization, he's not hard. He's not tough. He didn't have to earn his way there. He's never been in a situation where he is unprotected before. He's always had these shields of protection. He panicked and he shot somebody. And doesn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. And using phrases like, yeah, you're always telling me that I need to think first. And it's like, oh, so this is just the most serious offense. He's done this shit before, and he just keeps getting like to maintain his high status. Which changes in the next scene when he shows up for his first day back at work, and Stringer tells him he's going to the low risers. He's going in the pit, getting a serious demotion. He is going from the Fortune 500 company trading stocks to fucking nothing. Everything he gets to the pit. It's sloppy. It's disorganized. Nobody really is doing things the trained way. That
seems like all young kids kind of working there.
Exactly, because sorry, I shouldn't have said Fortune 500. It's like he went from working at fine dining to McDonald's.
Right.
And he's like, what the fuck is this? Like, they're not doing the same level of business. They're not. It's not the same. But you quickly get to see his strengths. He sure as shit knows how to put a team together. Like he's a great manager. He tells everybody, no, here's what you got to do. Here's the rules. But he's like, you know what? I don't care if you haven't watched Game of Thrones. I'm doing another reference. He's Jon Snow going to the wall. He's the princeling or the lordling who has all the sword skills in the world, but he hasn't really like been through any shit that puts him in a position where he's really tough. So anyway, it's put in the low risers, and here's where we meet some guys that I really like: Poot, Wallace, and Bodie. Now the main one that we meet is Bodie. He's kind of he's the guy who's always spitting. I don't know if you noticed that he does the little like spit thing out of your tongue. Which is pretty fucking cool. We all used to try to do that in high school when the episode first aired.
The days when spitting was an art form.
Yes. Well, you can. It's because he does. It's like a little like spit thing out of your tongue. I don't know if you noticed that. It's not normal spit. It's like it shoots out of your tongue. It's very strange, but you can do it. You just have to like bend your tongue in a certain way. There's your.
I remember trying to do that. I was never able to.
There's your Wired tidbit that you're not going to find in any other Wired podcast or otherwise. So anyway, so D'Angelo schools them on protocol, and they school D'Angelo on scams. He's like, you're going to want to count that money.
I think I'm going out.
Yeah. Huh?
I think I'm shutting down. Hold on.
No. All right, that's cool. Are you okay? Okay. All right, so Mike I think his power is running out. While he plugs that in, I'm going to jump right on to the next thing. How do you guys think Mike's doing? You think he's okay? No, I'm just kidding. It's the first time watching him. He's watched one episode. He's a good guy. He's a good kid. So anyway, so the next thing we got is some more of Daniels getting the Avon case dropped on him. And we hear quotes all the time of, oh, he's a company man. He's a company man. I'm editing this. I'm going to pause. Hold on. Nice, you back?
Yeah, sorry, my phone overheated.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to be okay for a little while?
I think so. I took the cover off and put it next to the fan. So.
All right, the fan's not too loud. That's perfect. So I'm editing these anyway, so I'm just going to cut all that stuff out. So
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh,
also, I gotta go probably at like 9.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're gonna. I'm gonna. Yeah, I'm speeding through the next like couple.
Okay,
minutes.
cool.
All right, sweet. So through the magic of editing, we are back. So let's cut back to. Oh no! So I was just mentioning in the pit, D'Angelo gets schooled on some of the scams, and we quickly go to another favorite character, Bubbles, and White Guy. I gotta get his.
Yes.
You like Bubbles so far?
Yeah, weirdly, those were the only 2 characters I remembered from. I watched the pilot episode years and years ago, and that was the only scene I remembered. And the one guy is from the movie Kids, right?
Oh shit! Is that guy?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
I remember recognizing him right away.
That's cool. Well, yeah. So they discuss. So Bubbles is this long time like high up, if you will, heroin addict, and and he's schooling his new buddy about how to scam by giving fake bills, all this stuff. So then they go and try to run the scam again. The white guy tries to run it, and they're about to the drug dealers catch him, and they're about to stomp the shit out of him. And then Bodhi asks D'Angelo, "Well, what do you want us to do?" And D'Angelo, who really is not cut out for this shit, clearly, especially in this area where scams get pulled and people get beat, he just walks away, which is, in a sense, saying, yeah, stomp him. But also, in a greater sense, it's saying, I don't want to make this decision. And so they stomp him. They stomp him bad to the point where he goes into the hospital, and we'll recap that and its impact on Bubbles and how it really kicks off the story in a little bit. So then I also wanted to mention as we start to meet a couple of the other characters that D'Angelo is very similar in his entitled lack of experience, but still has high up rank and position, and is recently demoted, as another character named Officer Prez Belusky. So Prez, who is the guy who you saw shoot his gun into the wall.
Oh yeah.
There are a lot of parallels between those two that we'll get into as the scenes develop. So anyway, we go back to Daniels in the law enforcement, and he basically, his superior Burrell, who is his direct superior, drops the Barksdale thing on him. He's like, listen, you're on fast track to major. You're my guy. I want you to man this. We need to man it. I don't want to solve it the way that McNulty wants to solve it, but this got dropped on me. I need you to be a company man. They keep referring to him as a company man. I need you to take it and handle it. Handling it basically like report back to me and I'll let you know what to do. And I think we're led to believe it's just get some people off the street, basically tuck this under the rug. We need to make them know that we're doing something about it, but we don't really want to dedicate what needs to be done to actually handle it. So that's very similar to McNulty's Major Rawls with McNulty. It's like I need you to just do this. You're like, fine, McNulty, you can have this. You get this. You're going to be a part of this. And then, meanwhile, another superior to Daniels is like, okay, he can have it. You're in charge. Make sure this doesn't get out of hand. So then very briefly, McNulty talks to his friend Fitz in the FBI about surveillance. They mention 9/11, and that gives McNulty the idea to use wiretap technology, which is where the show gets its name from. We'll come back to that later. We also have our
So there's not a character named The Wire.
No, not yet. It's actually like the cyborg.
There's no superhero named The Wire.
They take a hard right turn in season 2. And so then we have our first meeting of the detail with Lieutenant Daniels is leading this with McNulty, with Daniels, his girl, Greg's, Herc, and his partner, whose name I keep blanking on. That's my bad. I thought I had written down. And they're meeting with lawyer Rhonda Perlman, the redhead I had mentioned before. They basically have another argument about rip and runs versus honest long-term police work that McNulty's preaching, and then the chain of command, where it really is like, okay, Daniels maybe not as good of heart. I kept seeing flashes in the first episode of Daniels going like, you know what, he probably has a really good heart. He wants to do the right thing, but he really does hammer hard. We're going to do this by the books. Right. So, like, at least for me, I don't know if you noticed that, but I thought there's that internal struggle of I want to do the right thing, but I also care about my career.
Yeah.
Also, not just cares about his career. I think he honestly follows the rules because he's just gotten that beaten into his brain so much. So then there's a scene in the club where D'Angelo meets a stripper lady, and I titled that non-pertinent, which is a joke you'll get in like 6 episodes. So we're not going to talk about that. Later on, the cops, McNulty and his partner, get drunk as shit in a bar and on the train tracks, which is like their favorite spot, and then kind of joke about the case. Now we get into some real shit at the end of this episode, where we go to the hospital. We find out that Bubbles is the heroin addict, is Greg's, Lieutenant Daniels, cop Greg's criminal informant is Bubbles.
Right.
But they have a great relationship.
Had they referenced him before that as an informant, or
I don't believe they had, which is
okay.
I don't believe they had, which is very confusing to me because there's a scene where Greg's has a criminal informant in her car, a woman. And in my head, I was like, what? It would be so much simpler if they just put Bubbles there. So then when we see Bubbles later getting heroin, we're like, oh, that's that guy from before. I guess he's a main character. And then we see them meet up at the hospital, and they don't have to, like, introduce anything.
But
I like how we're punching up the pilot of The Wire 13 years later.
It happens. Why is he necessarily an informant before, though? Like, how do we know he just doesn't know her from being arrested, and
that's true.
Now he's an informant?
Oh, you know what? That might be. I'd have to think back on that. I'd have to rewatch it again.
Because there are definitely like, especially with addicts, I think sometimes they can form friendly relationships with like corrections officers or.
Yeah, I had my best friend in high school. He had his sister was a heroin addict, and she would go to West Baltimore between those years because we were in high school between 2000 and 2004. And she ended up, when she got sober, she would go to AA meetings and NA meetings, and the actual guy Bubbles is based on would speak, and she and so that's right. And they would talk, like, a lot of these addicts have these relationships because they get arrested, and I mean, you're spending a fair amount of time with these people. You end up, you'll see some of the cops and Bodie from the pit develop kind of like this love-hate relationship because they just spend so much time together. Like, you end up like, but yeah, so he agrees to help. So you're right. Maybe he wasn't a CI before, but we do notice they kind of, in later episodes, they kind of hint at a past relationship with them, and it's clear that she gives him money to help spy. And so, like, maybe that's why he was a CI before, but he was just a CI from like, I need $20 today. So I'll snitch on somebody for you, and then I'll see you next time I don't have a scam. So he agrees to help because it's also like I mentioned, these dominoes. He agrees to help on the Avon Barksdale case because he knows who's connected to who. But Avon's people stomped his friend. And if they hadn't stomped his friend, or if that was a different drug gangs or whatever, drug networks who stomped his friend, he wouldn't be snitching on, he wouldn't be doing this. Like, he even says he's doing it, what is it when you do something for free? I'm blanking on the Latin for it. Pro bono. He's doing it pro bono because he's like, no, this is personal. And he wouldn't have done that if it wasn't that specific. They wouldn't have even needed him to do that if it wasn't the specific set of events that occurred. And so now they have their CI.
It is a little weird I mean, what did he expect would happen? I mean, isn't that like kind of the proper punishment for if you try to do something like that to drug dealers? Like, what else would you expect?
Well, I think it's a Snot-Boogie thing where it's like you're not supposed to take it that far.
So he thinks they kind of broke the rules by putting him in the hospital instead of just like giving him a minor beatdown.
Yeah, and keep in mind at the time, I don't think he was awake. I think he was just in a coma. So as far as Bubbles was concerned, they killed him over $20 or $10 or whatever it was. So I think it was like bigger than that, or it's a TV show. That's the other or for all of these scenarios. Or
I don't know, but I feel like we got to hold this to higher standards than just say it's a TV show.
Yeah, that's bullshit. I shouldn't have said that.
But then we could also say they're all complex too, just like real people, and maybe Bubbles went, maybe he wasn't being reasonable to some degree.
Yeah, he was pissed. Yeah. Plus it had just happened. So in our closing shots, before we wrap this up, we see Gant, the witness from the trial, who pointed out that D'Angelo was the murderer.
Yes.
Shot dead in the street in broad daylight. And we find him dead. Of course, McNulty's now former partner is the guy who happened to show up that day. And I forget if this line is from this episode or the start of the next, but he says, he's like, you better not be a murderer or something like that. I forget exactly which body that was, but it goes to show stats versus real police work. It's like, you just better not be a murderer, I swear to God. But so they're sending a message to the witnesses, basically, here's what happens when you, even though D'Angelo got off, he got off and they still killed the witness. And it's just like, that just goes to show the way Avon and Stringer run things.
That makes me, again, though, feel like there's a contradiction because they're telling D'Angelo you have to let go of kind of your pride and your ego sometimes, and for the sake of the greater good, which for them is making drug money.
Yeah.
So why would they bring police attention by murdering a witness like that who wasn't involved other than being a witness?
Yeah, my guess would be a cost-benefit analysis of it's either ignorance or cost-benefit analysis. The cost-benefit would be what helps us more, what would hurt us more, a little bit police attention versus witnesses coming forward. It's like we've seen that exactly. The other thing is that it could just be ignorance. They don't know a whole detail has been assigned to them. As far as they know, they're fucking bulletproof. They just got out of like 10 murders. Like they're pretty much feel like the key to, maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're feeling like the key to our success has been not letting anybody testify against us. If they don't have any witnesses, then there can't be any guilty parties. Because they seem to run a pretty tight ship there. They even talk about how they fought for years to take over from the last West Baltimore, the brothers or whoever it was. So they took over that. These are guys who not only it's not that they just rose up in the drug game, they overthrew the previous kingpins. And I think and it seems when I hear that, I think, oh, so that's just something that happens. But I'm pretty sure it's not. I'm pretty sure this is we've come in, holy shit, just like Game of Thrones. We come in and the Baratheons have taken over a 1,000-year dynasty of Targaryens. That may be what we're stepping in on. The Barksdale dynasty has just overtaken the dynasty that's taken over the West Side drug game since before anyone can remember. So hasn't there been talk of a prequel Wire that would kind of explore that? Well, I know that before they did The Wire, they did, I guess it was Homicide, Life on the Streets.
Right.
But I don't think, I'd have to check, but I didn't watch it. I should have fucking watched it, especially when I'm doing a podcast. What was I thinking? What that is, I don't believe they're in the same universe kind of thing. I don't think they're the same. And if they
I don't think so either.
Yeah. So at the very end of the episode, D'Angelo looks very torn. and possibly signals a shift in his character, because he's no longer like the lighthearted, like, yeah, you think the guy who was just bragging about how the other witness flipped, you'd think that he would see that guy and go, yeah, that's what you get for fucking pointing me out. But he's clearly distraught about that. He's distraught about watching people get jumped. Something's up with this guy.
Yeah, and it seems like he felt like he was right in killing the guy in the beginning because, like, it was in self-defense.
It was him or me. He was coming after me. Right. Yeah.
Right. So, like, maybe he has, like, some sense of morality.
Yeah. Well, so, yeah, exactly. Or some sense of, like, I think everyone in that universe, or in that world, the drug game, has a sense of morality. It's just different than what we're used to thinking of as morality. Yeah. But his sense of something would have happened with him, maybe while he was in jail, who knows, that made his sense of morality different than that, or like made a significant change. Or maybe he was just kept out of all the shit. It looks like that's what happened. He was kept out of all the shit by being like the nephew of the guy, and so he hasn't seen any of like the real hardship. He just thinks it's all a game. So
now, there was a scene in there, and I was reading about. I'm sure you've read about it too, where they do a little flashback to the courtroom. You know what I'm talking about? To identify that the dead man was the witness.
Yeah.
And that seemed completely out of place.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think they ever do that again.
I looked it up, and it said that was something where David Simon didn't want to do it, and HBO kind of made him because they thought that people wouldn't remember, and I probably wouldn't have remembered who it was.
DVR and TV on DVD didn't exist.
Right.
So, yeah.
and it was weird. It was just, they had me so, in this reality kind of mind frame that it really jarred me when they did a flashback sequence all the time.
That'd be like if they all broke out into song in the pit.
Somebody turns to the camera.
We're drug dealers.
Somebody breaks the fourth wall and they're like, or like at the end, D'Angelo's like, "Hi, I play D'Angelo. Drugs are a real problem for a lot of people."
We had a lot of laughs tonight.
We had a whole lot of fun tonight, but there's one thing that's not funny: drug dealing. I play the wacky, carefree character of D'Angelo.
Or the guys who play Stringer Bell and McNulty are both British. If they just burst into the cheerio. Are you powering down? Okay. So real quick, just to wrap things up, I want to show one of the reasons I think this is such a great pilot is how the dominoes fall in just the right place that allows us great storytelling that allows us to meet every character along the way in context. It may be a little confusing at times, but it all makes sense in the sense of the story. So we start out, D'Angelo murders somebody, goes to court. That court case, him getting off, allows McNulty and this newly minted judge to open a case and go over everybody's heads, which would never happen in a million years if one person wasn't willing to risk his career and the other person wasn't like too young, or not young, but like naive and brand new to being a judge, that he would just feel like, oh, I get to wield my power. And so like most judges probably wouldn't have done that. So then that happens to open up this investigation. The investigation is given to a guy, Daniels, whose cop who gets put on the investigation with him has a CI who happens to have all this information on that exact drug dealer, which gives us an in that they wouldn't have had otherwise. Meanwhile, in the streets, we end up having the murder. D'Angelo gets off. He's demoted. Because he's demoted, he leads to a situation where, had it been another guy in there, he probably would have stopped them from beating the shit out of the white heroin addict. And then Bubs never would have had that motivation to be a CI or to continue being a CI, specifically about the Avon case. So on both sides of the law, at every branch from the highest ranked people to the lowest ranked people, a sequence of events happened that led to this scenario that opens up the wire.
Okay.
And that's how we start. So all in all, how did you feel about the episode?
Pretty good. I was still pretty skeptical. Like I generally, I've never really watched any of these shows from episode 1 all the way through, other than what's it called? That weird David Lynch one, Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay, Twin Peaks. Yeah.
And I kind of lost interest in. I've kind of lost interest in that, and I hope I can maintain interest. It's really hard for me to focus on stuff like this. I think I'm gonna like it though. I'm pretty impressed. I like that the characters are complex. I like that it's not your standard storytelling like we were saying before. It's more just capturing slices of what's going on. But it's also like not super grainy, like shaky cam documentary stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it kind of has shown me that I feel like it's improved to me again and again that like anything can be interesting if it's just done well. Like normally I really wouldn't be into like a cop show, I don't think.
Yeah.
But really like any setting, like Tarantino also has kind of proved that like it doesn't really matter what the setting is per se or like what like genre it is, as long as it's just done well, you know.
Yeah.
So, I think it's probably a good gateway drug into these TV series that people have been telling me about for years and years. And it seems like with the TV series, you can really like draw out the characters over time. You don't have to wrap everything up real quick. And I think it's pretty interesting so far.
All right, awesome. I was gonna say, so you're not regretting agreeing to do this?
No, not at all. No, I'm excited about it.
All right, cool. Well, we will be back next week with an episode on. I believe we'll cover both episodes 2 and 3 because the stories aren't as dense as this pilot, but also because they kind of intersect in a way that if you cut them in half, you can get a lot more out of it. All right, sweet. Sure. So I will catch you later, dude.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
See ya.
Bye.